And welcome into Gator Bytes on the 1010XL.com podcast network, also being simulcast on the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page. Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialists. For the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialists for any of your orthopedic injuries or concern. And be sure to check out their website, se-ortho.com. He is Dylan Denmark. I'm the hacker, Ryan Green. What a week in the University of Florida football world. John Sumrall, the brand new head coach. We got a couple of new coordinators, including a really interesting hire at offensive coordinator. And Billy Napier has a brand new job at James Madison University. Denmark, there is a lot to get into. First and foremost, though, just your overall thoughts now, basically, I guess 5-6 days removed from the hiring of John Sumrall.
Yeah, it's what the University of Florida, from a PR standpoint, what they've done, it needs to be studied at universities and taught to students across the country, because from the reaction that was happened from Sunday morning to Sunday afternoon, to how Gator fans couldn't stand the hire. It was another G5 guy. We're going back to Billy Napier 2.0, and to now 5 days later, it should be studied, because it's every Gator fan, it feels like, is on board and they are ready to go. They're excited for the season next year. I'm sure social media plays a big part in that, and in the clips that they've seen. One thing is for sure, this guy knows the fan base and knows what they want to hear, because whether it's Florida Gators PR, if it's Steve Spurrier, Urban Meyer, they definitely told him, hey, Lane Kiffin was expected to be the guy. Fans are pissed. They wanted an offensive guy. They want offense to be good again. And this guy knows how to talk. And he's definitely a rah-rah guy. He definitely feels like a Dan Lanning when he comes to the podium and talks to, talking to his players to get his guys motivated. So they've done an exceptional job on that front. And it should be studied in textbooks.
Well, first and foremost, to your point, he absolutely won the press conference. Now, we're in talking season, and we're going to be in talking season for the next 9 months, or I guess 8 months and change, until they kick this thing off in 2026. So all we can go on is talk and on hirings and that sort of thing, which we'll get to in a moment. But in watching that press conference, I don't know if Summerall could have done any better. And I really mean that. The little jab at Lane Kiffin at the beginning, like you said, telling Gator fans that this is his dream job, knowing of what the offense needs to look like at the University of Florida, taking time out, like you said, to talk about Steve Spurrier and Urban Meyer. I don't know if John Summerall is going to coach his way out of a brown paper sack. I have no idea. But what I do know, in a very short amount of time, is he absolutely owned that press conference on Monday.
Yeah, I'm not one of these people that, when the initial hire happened on Sunday, whatever it was, around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I was like, I kind of shrugged my shoulders. I'm like, I haven't watched a lot of Tulane football. And then when you did a little bit of digging on Sunday, you're like, okay, this isn't that bad of a hire. This guy really was, the second or third choice to a lot of teams. The press conference was pretty good. Now, I really don't care about the press conference.
I don't either, but again, it's all we can go on.
Right. And, this guy could have farted and accidentally pooped his pants, and I would have still had the same opinion. What's he going to do in September, October, and November? And that would be that. I will tell you, Spurrier, I'm sure you've seen, after the press conference, he was asked, what's your reaction to Sumrall? And anytime someone's asked about someone, whether it's, when you take a new job, or what an employer thinks about an employee, and you would get asked, what do you like about someone? the response to that answer is usually something you like about something from the previous person that they didn't do well. And Spurrier said, "Yeah, I like his attitude. The attitude teams usually take on the attitude of the characteristics of their coaches, and I can tell you, this guy hates losing. He hates losing. So that feels like a direct correlation that Billy Napier was perfectly okay with losing, and the all shucks, it was okay, and he wasn't a fiery guy. Well, now you're getting the polar opposite.
Well, the one thing that Summerall said too, and I told you about this on Hacker After Dark, he held court for 30 minutes. The one thing he said that'll be on T-shirts if it ultimately happens, you don't hear a lot of coaches say this. Winners win. I'm a winner. I'm going to win. And I was like, whoa. For a guy that is now the brand new head coach at the University of Florida, in less than 24 hours, standing up there in front of the entire Gator Nation, knowing the backstory about how people are upset about the Lane Kiffin situation, they're mad at Scott Strickland. For him to have the guts to go up there and say, winners win, I'm a winner, I'm going to win, whew, that was quite the statement.
Yeah, it was like I said to start. He knew from what a lot of people have told him before the press conference what fans wanted to hear, and they all the fans got that. I'm a winner. Taking a jab at Lane Kiffin, mentioning a lot of the alumni, and talking about the offense. Which I mean, from a defensive guy, most guys are pretty tone deaf to offense. He knows that there is a specific type of way to winning at the University of Florida on offense, and that's scoring a lot of points. I'm sure you've seen Danny Warfel going to a couple different podcasts, and Sumrall was mentioning, you know, that Florida should have used a lot of different personnel on offense, and shouldn't have used many tight ends, should use more receivers. What a novel concept! That
Yeah.
the offense should not have been run through Tony Livingston and Hayden Hansen, and should have been used more with four wide receiver sets with Dallas Wilson, Aiden Mizell, Vernell Brown, Eugene Wilson, and others. That was not the case in a highly efficient, potent offense ran by Billy Napier this year. I think Billy Napier's offense this year might have scored 4 touchdowns in the fourth quarter this year. One against Texas, not including the Long Island game. One against South Florida. One in garbage time against Tennessee, and then maybe against Florida State. Yeah, there was one against Florida State because it happened at the very end.
And that
Yeah, I
wasn't
mean,
even Billy Napier.
right. This offense looks like it's going to be a lot different. And then the OC that we're going to get into did a lot of good numbers at Georgia Tech this season.
Well, one thing he said too, you talk about having your pulse on the Gator Nation, psyche. At the press conference, Summerall said, I would have given it to Jaden Ball 10 more times because obviously that was the narrative. That Ball didn't get a lot of carries. All right, let's not bury the lead with Buster Faulkner. So, truthfully, I didn't know a lot about Buster Faulkner up until about the last year or two. But I know what they're doing at Georgia Tech, and I know what Haynes King looks like. And you know this, I was always a Brent Key guy. I wanted Brent Key to be the head coach at Florida. And I was told repeatedly by people in Atlanta, people around the University of Florida program, all right, yeah, if they get Brent Key, that's great. Just make sure he brings Buster Faulkner with him. Because the perception of Brent Key is that he's a leader of men up there, but that's not his offense. That's Buster Faulkner's offense, what Georgia Tech is doing. And for Florida to go there and John Sumrall and to get Buster Faulkner, a 44-year-old up and coming offensive coordinator that literally everybody after that hire yesterday, whether it's David Pollock, a former Georgia Bulldog, whether it's Josh Pate, whether it's you name your media analyst, I have not seen anything but rave reviews about this hire. Grand slam is the verbiage. Again, will it work? We'll see. We'll have to wait till August. But of the candidates that you could have gotten to run the offense at Florida, to go to Georgia Tech and to basically steal Buster Faulkner from the Yellow Jackets, on the surface, Denmark, that looks like one heck of a hire.
Yeah, I didn't hear about it until I was listening to Andy Staples, his podcast that he does pretty good with On Three. I heard about his name first on the his podcast last Saturday, and he was talking about when he was mentioning other names, and John Sumrall looked like he was going to be the lead guy Saturday night, Saturday afternoon. He mentioned this offensive coordinator, and I was like, okay. And he's like, if he hires this guy's going to be a home run hire for the offensive coordinator. And then I was when he finally got hired yesterday, I just went on YouTube. I just typed in Buster Faulkner, and every person that covers Georgia Tech was like, "This is a huge loss. This guy." Even though he was, he wasn't the offensive coordinator at Georgia a couple of years ago when they won those titles, he was very involved in the offense and the schemes that they were running. And then he's been a play caller at a lot of the lower level schools like Southern Miss and a couple others. Georgia Tech, for what it's worth, 30 points per game. That's 18th best in the country. Florida was 18.5 points per game. They were 118th in the country points per game. And Georgia Tech was 6.6 yards per play. That's a very big stat. And they were 12th in the country. We're talking about a Georgia Tech team that it's very hard to get into because of the academics they have. And I know they play in the ACC, and the ACC was very down this year. And Haynes King is a really good quarterback. But that is very good to see. This is, a very good hire from what it seems like on paper. We'll see it on the field in 9 months. But, this offense is so desperate for someone to get the most out of its players. And, there were a couple of guys that were at the presser, Lagway, Tramel Jones. I know Jaden Ball was one of the first players to dap him up whenever he got to the presser. It'll be interesting to see how much, now that we know who the OC is, the OC was the main hire in this. How much of these guys are going to stay and be retained because we're going to know here pretty soon with the transfer portal opening in a couple weeks.
Well, and the thing about Buster Faulkner is I watched a lot of Georgia Tech people, and some were depressed, others were pissed that he left. It's very obvious why he left. A, it's Florida compared to Georgia Tech, but even that aside, when you're now taking over the Florida offense, Sumrall is a defensive guy. It's going to be Buster Faulkner's offense. I don't know. I wouldn't go as far as to call him a co-head coach, but I would imagine Sumrall is going to kind of give him the reins a little bit to this thing and say, have at it. I'm going to be focusing my attention on the defense, kind of like Will Muschamp did back in the day. And maybe that's a bad comparison, although I do see a lot of Muschamp in Sumrall from an attitude perspective, a defensive, tough guy that gets in people's faces, that sort of thing. But Buster Faulkner now gets to come run his offense in the Southeastern Conference. It's going to be his barbecue, and that's a heck of an opportunity. And by the way, I don't think Buster Faulkner is going to be in Gainesville for the long haul. This guy's destined to be a head coach sooner rather than later. I would bet he's in Gainesville a year or two max before he gets a head coaching opportunity. And if that's ultimately the case, that'll be great because obviously that means he would have been successful at Florida to warrant a head coaching opportunity. But again, when you hear a guy like David Pollock, a Georgia Bulldog, talk about a grand slam hire for Florida with Buster Faulkner, and I'll go back to, like I said, I wanted Brent Key. He was one of my main guys at the start to be the head coach. I had people in Atlanta say, yeah, but just make sure he brings Buster Faulkner with him. Well, they didn't get Brent Key, but they did get Buster Faulkner.
Yeah, and I wonder now, we just got a comment, and I was going to mention this, how many of the guys from Georgia Tech are going to come to Florida now?
Potentially.
Whether it be offensive linemen, the big person that Florida is going to have to get, regardless of Lagway, and I think DJ Lagway is going to stay. No inside information. I just think that's what's going to happen.
Well, he's got a 3-year NIL deal. He'd be stupid not to stay. My question all along, does the new staff want him? I think is the bigger question, as rather because DJ Lagway financially it would benefit him to stay at Florida.
And regardless of if he stays or leaves, um, the quarterback at Georgia Tech, Haynes King is going to leave and he's going to move on. His eligibility is done. Aaron Philo, the backup quarterback for Georgia Tech, seems to be pretty good. He broke state records in Georgia. I think he broke Trevor Lawrence's record for passing yards. He's been a backup for 2 years. If he's able to not stay at Georgia Tech and come to Florida, that's going to be a big piece because regardless if he stays or leaves, Florida has to get a quarterback out of the portal and has to be ready to go. It doesn't seem like Tramel Jones is ready to go to take the reins. I know Florida got the kid in Tampa that just signed.
Yeah, Will Griffin.
So, and it doesn't seem like there is a quarterback that's on the roster that if something were to happen to DJ Lagway, whether it be in the offseason or, something that happens in the game, that you can put a quarterback in the game that's ready to go. Aaron Philo is a name to look out for if he's able to leave Georgia Tech and come to Florida.
And one thing I've been told about Buster Faulkner is he's like a chameleon in the sense that he adapts to his players. What he ran at Georgia Tech with Haynes King was to put Haynes King in the best position to be successful. He can also do that with whatever he is being dealt. So that's one of the other appealing things about him is it's not like Gus Malzahn, where Gus Malzahn obviously needs a type of quarterback to run his offense. That's not necessarily the case with Buster Faulkner. What I've been told again, is he adapts pretty well to the talent that is on the roster. So we will see. But again, home run hire. And then Brad White, the defensive coordinator, was either a co-defensive coordinator or the main DC at Kentucky dating back to 2019. I had people as recently as Sunday prior to him being hired, once it was pretty apparent that Lane Kiffin was going to LSU, that said, all right, if Baker, the current DC at LSU, gets a head coaching job, LSU would be very interested in Brad White from Kentucky. So there's another guy that seems to be in demand. Sumrall had a relationship with him from his time at Kentucky. He comes in. I would be lying if I could give you an X's and O's breakdown of Brad White's defense. Plus, when Sumrall is a defensive guy anyway, I think it'll probably be a majority of Sumrall's scheme to begin with. But Brad White is another guy that appears to be in demand or was in demand prior to taking the Florida job.
Yeah, the defense isn't really what I'm worried about because when whatever side the head coach is on, that's the offense. That's the side of the ball that I really don't tend to worry about. It's usually the other side. Now, when it comes to Billy Napier, the team he ran, but when it comes to this in particular, the offense is going to be the biggest question. You got the offensive coordinator, and to piggyback what you were talking about, with the personnel that the offense uses. Yeah, I mean, any coach. Really good coaches, they change what they do from the personnel that they have. Whether it be the offense or the defense. And the offense in this point, in this standpoint, you can't run the same offense year to year. Depending on like this team, if they're able to retain a lot of the same personnel, you've got to spread out and use your receivers. I mean, it is point blank ridiculous to why they repeatedly, week after week, game after game, ran 2 tight end sets and refused to run the football. There were games this season where Jaden Ball got the ball 5 times in the first half. There were times where you had electric receivers that could, at any point in the game, take the ball and be a home run hitter and take it 80 yards, and yet they're on the sideline because we have to use 2 tight end sets. Smart coaches know how to use their personnel, and they change according to what their roster is like.
Today's Gator podcast is brought to you by Southeast Orthopedic Specialist. Again, for the highest quality care, you can rely on Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for any of your orthopedic injuries or concern. And be sure to check out the good Dr. Kevin Murphy Thursday morning, 7 o'clock hour on The Drill with Jeff and Dan for his weekly analysis of injuries in the world of sports. And again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for their continued support here of the Gator Bytes podcast. You mentioned Billy Napier. Well, maybe he'll take his two tight end set to James Madison as he's diving right back in, reportedly finalizing a 5-year deal to be the next head coach of James Madison. Interestingly enough, James Madison is ranked right now. They have a conference championship game either tonight or tomorrow, I believe tonight. And if they win, there is a world where James Madison could even find themselves in the college football playoff. Now, their head coach is leaving to take the job at UCLA. Billy Napier goes to James Madison. Not that we're going to spend a lot of time on this, but you and I talked about it last night on Hacker After Dark. And for the Gator Bytes audience, I'll throw it back at you. There was venom towards Jim McElwain. There was vitriol towards Jim McElwain when he left. When Will Muschamp got fired and took over South Carolina, I think people kind of got over Muschamp and dare I say, forgave him a little bit and still liked him as the guy. They just didn't want him to be the coach anymore. To me, Denmark, I think Napier is going to fall in more of the Muschamp category than McElwain. Gator fans did not like Jim McElwain. They didn't like the way it ended. It was a weird from the get-go, and they were happy to see him go. And they genuinely did not like the guy, most of them. I think people were happy to see Billy Napier go. But I do think there was something about Billy. I think the fan base related to him a little bit. Where I think, 2 or 3 years from now, if he's successful at James Madison, I get the sense that most Gator fans will be happy for him, will be rooting for him to maybe be successful. What's your thought?
Yeah, I don't know where I land. Fans don't really care, from the standpoint of how they disdained Jim McElwain. But I mean, the guy ran such a poor offense that it's going to take a while, for fans to get over that. The amount of times that Napier had 30 yards of offense in the first half against Miami, had 1 first down, or go ahead.
Let me just throw this at you, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'll give you a prime example. When Jim McElwain took over Central Michigan, and I would watch them on a Tuesday night taking on Miami of Ohio, I was genuinely rooting against Central Michigan because Jim McElwain was the head coach. Next year, if James Madison's on a Wednesday night playing whomever, and I see Billy Napier on the sideline, I'll probably root for James Madison. I guess that's my point.
Yeah, I don't know if Gator fans are going to root for him year one. I mean, y'all can drop it in the chat. I see a couple people right now saying no, or James Madison will get in the class before Florida. That is true. As of right now, I would take, not this season, I'm saying moving, for the next 2 years. James Madison does have an easier chance at getting in the playoff than Florida for the next 2 years, because if you win your conference title with a little bit of luck from other conference champions, you do have a better chance of making the playoff as opposed to Florida, because Florida has you're in the SEC and you're competing with a lot of other, the best teams in the country. So that is true. But, yeah, I think Gator fans will hate watch him first year. And then if the offense for Florida is good next year, I don't think Gator fans are going to really care about Billy Napier and what he's done. That's my opinion. But, yeah, I don't think that's the venom that Gator fans right now have for Napier will carry on for 3 to 5 years.
I think you brought this up earlier in the week. It will be hilarious, though. And it'll probably piss some people off if one of his first orders of business at James Madison is to hire a play caller. I mean, if he learned from the error of his ways and if he gives up play calling, I don't expect him to do that. But I wonder how Gator fans would feel about that if that's the decision he makes at James Madison.
Oh, I hope he does. It would be hilarious. It'd be one of the funniest things that the reason you were fired is, not the reason that you're hired, but one of the first things that you do when you get hired is hire an OC. That would be pretty hysterical because, I mean, we all know the story by now that Strickland gives him that vote of confidence after the Georgia loss before the Texas game that he's going to stay for year 4. And there was of the thinking that he was going to hire an OC. He does good, toward the end of the year, beats LSU and Ole Miss. And he's like, well, this offense is doing good. I don't need to hire an OC. And Scott Strickland says, all right, 10-4, go ahead and run your ship. And then we saw how it turned out for the 2025 season. If he's able to do that, it would be nothing but hilarious.
All right, as we begin to wrap up, I want to end with a quick basketball thought. Sumrall is coaching Tulane tonight against North Texas in the American Championship game, and the winner of that game is essentially guaranteed a playoff spot. Gator fans, hit us up in the comments. Denmark, I'll ask you as well. What do you want to see from Summerall tonight? Do you hope Tulane wins and gets into the playoff? Do you want to see him get boat race so they can take over at Florida officially 100% tomorrow? I mean, my thinking is I want to see what Summerall's got. I'm going to be kind of rooting for Tulane tonight. And the longer Tulane plays on a national stage in the college football playoff, the more you see John Sumrall, probably the better long term that might be for the University of Florida.
Yeah, I don't know if he loses tonight. What Florida's going to improve. I know like he would probably end up leaving the school he's at, Tulane, and then come to Florida and be wheels on the ground running. But I mean, if he wins and then loses in the first round of the playoff, which most people would expect, I think the first team that they're going to play is going to end up being like a Texas Tech or an Oregon, whoever that 5 seed is, more than likely, or a team around there, maybe Texas A&M. I don't know what the vast difference is going to be because early signing day already happened. The last day to sign is today, so they've had the last 2 days and today for high schoolers. I don't know what the big advantage would be, if Sumrall, loses as compared to him winning. So I guess I'd rather have him win. Now I don't want to see him going on a run and make the playoffs and win a couple of games, which I don't think is going to happen, and most people don't think that's going to happen either. Yeah, I mean I want to see him win and succeed and do well. Newsflash: I have not seen a lot of Tulane football, and I don't know what they run. I really don't know. I'm sure Gator fans are gonna want to know like what kind of defense they run and all that. To me, it really doesn't matter if you run a 3-4 or a 4-3. At the end of the day, players make plays. It's more of what the offense can do and what kind of offense you bring, and that's going to be mostly with the OC. So yeah, I want to see him succeed and win tonight.
I would love to see him go on a run. I don't think they will. But again, as long as Tulane's playing and as long as that camera's on John Sumrall, it says current Tulane coach will coach Florida in 2026. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Like you said, the early signing period's over. Sumrall, at the very latest, will be there on January 20th or whatever it is. I would love to see Tulane go on a run. Obviously, probably not going to happen. They could win tonight and then probably lose in round 1, which is what I think a lot of people expect. Although North Texas is pretty good. They're both ranked in the top 25, so that should be an interesting game tonight. And I'm sure Gator fans will be checking that out. Really quick, last thought on football. The calendar sucks in college football. It's the way it is. I'll tell you this, though. I mean, all that narrative about you're going to lose the recruiting class, John Sumrall got hired on Sunday. The Gators are going to finish probably top 15, at the worst top 20 in recruiting, because outside of the running back that decommitted and went to Texas A&M, they basically kept everybody else, and they even flipped a 4-star safety from LSU to Florida because he had a relationship with Sumrall, who recruited him at Tulane. Summerall was the coach for 72 hours in Gainesville, and they're going to end up with a top 15 recruiting class out of high school this year.
Yeah, to be quite frank, I have no idea what most signing classes were. It seems like there was not a big mass exodus from one team to another. If we talk about other than Penn State, there's so many coaching hires in this cycle, and it feels like there was not a lot of movement in this recruiting class. Now, granted, this recruiting class felt like
Penn
these
State
guys
lost a lot of guys. Penn State lost like 5 guys to Virginia Tech that went with Franklin.
That's why I mentioned them, because there was no other team that seemed like they lost, an entire cycle, like Arkansas, Auburn, whoever, LSU. Penn State, they're so bad. I think they had 2 or 3 recruits, and ironically, one of them is a quarterback, and you have no idea who their coach is. It seems like they're going to might get Matt Campbell from Iowa State, which honestly, from some people that cover college football, that might be one of the best hires in the country if they're able to land him. He's a very good coach. Is at Iowa State that they're not in contention to usually win at a high level. Anyway, Florida's done a good job of keeping the same class, and I guess I'm wondering how much money has been involved with okay, you're signing here. This is the money you're getting, and you're signing on the dotted line and move and go. Now, I mean, if they didn't really like the coaching hire, I'm sure they could have had options and made a different decision. But yeah, pretty good signing class. They were in the top 15, right behind Florida State. Florida State had like 30 guys commit, which is incredible. Florida had 15, I believe, around there. Top 15 recruiting class, and then it's going to be now this week is over. Signing day's done. After today, you have your coordinators, you have your head coach, fill in the rest of your staff, which is less of a priority. It's a big priority to the head coach, but less of a priority for the fans. Now it is okay. What is the retention of the roster going to look like in the next couple of weeks?
Crazy to think you said Florida State. That game was only 6 days ago. The Florida State game. It feels like 6 weeks or even 6 months ago with everything that's gone on this week. Southeast Orthopedic Specialist brings you Gator Bytes here on the 1010XL.com podcast network. Again, thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for the highest quality care. You can rely on them. Go to se-ortho.com. Quickly, Gator basketball, that was a tough one at Cameron Indoor. They played well, except for Xavier Lee. He was bad again. Boogie Flan had a really good second half. I think Florida is going to be fine. They're going to win 20, 22 games. They'll be a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, probably get knocked out in the Sweet 16. I mean, they're 8 games in. They're 5-3. They play UConn on Tuesday. You just can't replace 3 guards that are in the NBA. I don't care how good your front court is. And we had the national championship last year, so it's hard to complain. But clearly, Xavier Lee, Boogie Flan are nowhere in the same atmosphere what they had last year with Elijah Martin, Walter Clayton, and Will Richard.
Yeah, and it was tough. Florida trailed most of the game, and then there was a bad goaltending call. Like Todd Golden said at the end of the game, you're on the road, you're not going to get a call. Those 50-50 balls are going to go to the home team, especially when it's Duke. And then Florida takes the lead, and you're like, man, Florida's going to they might pull away and get away with one. And then Duke hits a 3. Boozer's son gets like 30 points. He gets nearly half the points for Duke's team, which is pretty incredible. You usually don't see that in college basketball. He'll be one of the top picks in the draft. And yeah, it sucked. You keep talking about the shooting, and yeah, it's an issue. The turnovers, just I can't get over the turnovers. I mean, every game it's like 15-18. Every game, it's and they lost on Thanksgiving, which doesn't help. I'm not going to panic. We're in December 5th, and the schedule doesn't get easier. You play UConn Tuesday, so the turnovers number one for me, or it's got to be fixed. And then the guard play has not been good, and the shooting, one would think, is going to get fixed eventually in the coming weeks.
You play UConn on Tuesday, and then you have 4 non-conference games, the toughest of which I believe is like George Washington. So the schedule eases up. You'll be 9-4 going into conference play, and in the conference you'll go, 12-6, something like that, 11-7. So what would that put you at? 21-10 going into the SEC tournament. That's the kind of season I think it's going to be for the Gators. And look, you're a 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. We'll see. But again, it's hard to repeat as national champions. There's a reason very, very few teams have done it. And we will ultimately see how it plays out. Denmark, have a great week for people here in Jacksonville and I guess the surrounding area, wherever you're listening. On most of these 1010XL social media platforms, you and I will have a Friday night edition of Hacker After Dark beginning at 8 o'clock tonight on 1010XL. More on Florida, and certainly a big preview of the Jaguars and the Colts, a big one in the NFL on Sunday. So have a good, where are we at here? About 10 hours or so, and I will see you at 8 o'clock this evening.
Yes, sir. See you then.
Thank you to Southeast Orthopedic Specialist for bringing you Gator Bites. 1010XL.com and the Florida Gator 1010XL Facebook page.